skills are how you observe, describe, and participate. There are 3 how skills: acting non-judgmentally, one-mindfulness, and effectiveness. Non-judgmentalness is letting go of evaluating and judging reality. There are 2 types of judgments: judgments that discriminate and judgments that evaluate. To discriminate is to discern or analyze whether 2 things are the same or different. Something meets some type of standard, or if something fits the facts. Some ways you've been judged are the grades you received from your teachers, the competitions you participated in where one person wins and the others do not, the assessments you get from your boss. Judgments can be considered good or bad. An idea of a good versus bad judgment would be, is this food good and healthy, or is this food bad and unhealthy? As a dietitian, I try to steer clear of good and bad when it comes to the nutrient density or healthiness of a food, especially when we're making those choices ourselves and we're not certain about what we need to choose. When we label them good and bad, it tends to make people think that if they eat certain foods that are not highly nutritious, that they themselves are bad. It becomes a moral issue, and food is not moral. It's important to understand that some things can be better for us than others, but that doesn't make them 100% good. And things that are less advantageous to our health and well-being aren't 100% bad. We use good and bad as a teaching tool for children because it's simple. Unfortunately, some people get a little bit dogmatic and moral about their good versus bad. That transfers to the child. This is something that we continue to do and experience throughout our life. At some points in our lives, our judgments of ourselves and others puts a wedge between our ability to learn and our ability to connect, especially when these judgments are placed on our capacity, our timing, and whether or not we are good enough. The more we place these judgments on ourselves, we judge others. This puts a strain on our relationships and creates conflict. It can damage our connections with people we care for. Very few of us like people who are judgmental of us. It's negative reinforcement, and that only works until it doesn't. Judging others might get them to change temporarily, but more often than not, it leads people to avoid or retaliate against those who judge them badly. Judgments can also negatively affect our emotions. When we add evaluation of good or bad to people or things around us, it can have a strong effect on our emotional responses to the person or the thing that we are judging. It is often difficult to recognize that we have created the judgments, which have then created the very events that can dysregulate our emotions. Some judgments evaluate. To evaluate is to judge someone or something as good or bad, worthwhile or worthless, valuable or invaluable. Evaluations are something we add to facts. They are based on opinions, personal values, and ideas in our minds. These are not always factual. When they are, it is part of our factual reality. In DBT skills, we practice letting go of the valuations and keeping the discriminations. Our aim of non-judgmentalness is to let go of the judgments that evaluate as good or bad, and to keep the judgments that discriminate and seek consequences. A consequence is a result of a behavior. It does not need to be judged as good or bad, but rather whether it is workable or not workable. That is a huge part of what we are discussing. We tend to place good, bad judgments regarding an action, event, or behavior, but perceive and share these judgments as if they are about the character of the person or the event itself. A person is not good or bad because they do something that doesn't work. They are just a person learning, and consequences are there for their actions. When we make a person good or bad in our judgments, we shame them. This separates them, and we do this to ourselves as well. This use of judgment is separating us from our reality. It's not based in facts, but rather opinions. Discrimination can easily become judgmental as well. Discriminations can turn into judgments when we exaggerate differences between two things. In these instances, we describe what we believe to be factual rather than what we observe to be factual. When we discriminate against people, we are judging based on whether or not we think their behaviors, their beliefs, or anything about them is good or bad. Again, these judgments are based on opinion. They are in the mind of the observer. They are not qualities of what the observer is judging. Adding worth or value to what we observe doesn't allow us to see it as it is. If something can be worthwhile, valuable, or good in the eyes of one person or group, it can always be viewed as worthless, of no value, or bad in another person or group. An important mindfulness skill is not judging things in this manner. Sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's religious, sometimes it's personal preference or not having been exposed to something before. Oftentimes, we make things we haven't been exposed to bad to feel safe in distancing from them and not dealing with the unfamiliar. Non-judgmentalness is describing reality as what is without adding evaluation of good or bad. Everything that happens in the universe has been caused. Changing the causes of things works better than judging things. Saying that things should not have happened is saying that they are bad or that they should be different, and that is ineffective. It doesn't change what is. We need to determine the circumstances that cause the things we don't like and change them. An example would be not wanting drunk drivers on the road. We can't just dislike it and say that they shouldn't be there. We have police to patrol. We have education programs around how to drive safely. We have programs for people who have trouble with alcohol, like Alcoholics Anonymous. These are ways that we can change the cause of the behavior versus judging the outcomes of an unchanged cause. If making judgments and demands of reality does not change reality, then why do we keep making them? It seems easier to judge than change. In the short term, expressing our demands can change reality. Getting angry, pouting, or crying about the unfairness of what someone has done does sometimes make people change, just to get us to stop acting so angry, stop pouting, or stop crying. Long term, however, it doesn't have a positive effect. Non-judgmentalness, in essence, is accepting others and oneself and one's own behavior. It is central to all spiritual traditions of mindfulness. So how do we do this? How do we let go of good or bad? Remember our descriptions? We just describe what is. There's no need to evaluate people, their behavior, or events. There's just what is happening. The goal here is to take a non-judgmental stance when observing, describing, and participating. Judgment is any labeling or evaluating of something as good or bad, as valuable or not, as worthwhile or worthless. Letting go of that labeling is being non-judgmental. Replacing evaluation with simple statements or descriptions of what is allows for non-judgmentalness. The goal is not to replace bad with good or worthless with worthwhile. It's to stop judging at all. The truth of the matter is nothing is all good and nothing is all bad. There's always going to be another side, and there's always going to be another opinion. That's why we want to simplify and see things as they are. Then we take actions. This doesn't mean that we can't say good job or give people positive feedback or praise. Positive judgments have far fewer negative consequences than do negative judgments. When we reduce our internal non-judgmentalness, we can say good job as a means to connect and to encourage. We have to let go of should. I like to say stop shoulding all over yourself. This means letting go of defining how the world should be and letting go of demands on reality to be what we want it to be simply because we want it to be that way. When we are being non-judgmental, we let go of saying and thinking that things should be different than they are. We also let go of saying what we ourselves should be, and if we need to be different than we are. We can replace should with descriptions of feelings or desires. I want things to be different. I want to be different than I am. I hope you will do this for me. An alternative is to replace should with this is caused by. Everything is caused in the universe. It is what it is, and everything is caused. Remind yourself of that. Place that on a post-it note that you see often. It is what it is, and everything is caused. It goes how it goes because it goes how it goes. Non-judgmentalness does not mean approval. When things happen that are destructive, that we do not like, or that we do not feel fit our values, we have a better chance of stopping or changing them if we try to understand and then change the cause. Accepting that there is cause gives us access to understanding how things work and why something does what it does and goes how it goes. Non-judgmentalness does not mean denying consequences. It is often very important to observe and remember consequences of behavior and events, particularly when the consequences are either destructive to things we value or highly rewarding to us. It can be very important to communicate these consequences to others. Instead of saying this food is bad, you can say when there is bacteria in food, it can make us sick. Describing consequences can be difficult. This is why we lean on judgments. People often use judgmental statements as a shorthand for consequences and eventually forget the consequences they are referring to. Non-judgmentalness does not mean keeping quiet about preferences or desires. Asking for changes is not judgmental, but preferences and desires often become judgments on reality as it is. This is where the should gets in the way. The important question is, who says so? We don't have the power to say what should and should not be. if you really think about it, if we could say what should and should not be, it'd be a lot of responsibility. If you change one thing to fit your preferences on a particular day, you might have intended something completely different than the consequences you receive. What then? A great way to work through a judgment is this. If you say something should be, ask yourself, why? When you have an answer to that question, ask yourself again, why? People should love others more. Why should people love others more? The answers given will provide another option for why is that? Eventually, you will get to a baseline belief that is a cause. You won't get to the truth or the facts of how things are. It's best not to put demands on reality, but you can change that belief, which will change the cause. Values and emotional responses to events are not themselves judgmental. A person can like something without also saying that it is good or bad. Things that we value or things we believe are important to our welfare and the welfare of society at large. Generally, we are attached to these values. This is why it could be so difficult when someone disagrees with our values. We feel threatened. It is easy to view these people as bad by wanting, desiring, or admiring something. However, it isn't bad. Hating or feeling disgusted by something is not necessarily judgmental either. Judgments can also be shorthand for describing preferences. Again, we want to use these judgments. We often forget that we are expressing a preference, and we deliver them and believe that it is a statement of fact and that it is non-judgmental. Judgments often go along with the statement of facts. There are literal meanings to words that are non-judgmental, but are almost always used as judgmental statements. Statement of fact may be judgment because the fact is simultaneously being judged. For instance, I am fat may be a simple statement of fact. But if one adds in thoughts, implications, or a tone of voice that being fat is bad or unattractive, then a judgment is being added. It is important when doing this work and learning to become non-judgmental that you don't judge judging. That's a fun one. Our first exercise in practicing non-judgmentalness is describing something that you dislike. Think about a disliked interaction with someone or a disliked characteristic of another person or yourself. Practice describing these things without using judgmental words or tone of voice. If you start to use a judgmental voice, pause and begin again. Another exercise is to observe your own judgmental facial expressions, posture, and voice tones. When you look at your own, you can then check that out in others. It might be helpful to ask those who truly care about you and that you truly care about what they have observed as judgmental ways of being in your behavior when you deliver communication. When you catch yourself having judgmental thoughts, pause and choose to describe. Just share what you observe with your senses. Then pause and describe the consequences of what is happening or what you are experiencing. You can then go into your emotional mind and describe your feelings in response to these facts, emotions, and non-judgments. Now we move on to one-mindfulness, being completely present in this one moment, just for this moment. When we set our intentions for the course, we said, just for today. You can take that to each moment throughout your day as well. That will be being one-minded. The past is over. It does not exist in the present. We can have thoughts and images of the past, and even intense emotions can arise when we think about the past or the image of the past that goes through our minds. We can worry about things we did in the past or things others did. We may wish that our pasts were different or wish that we were still in our past. But it is crucial to recognize that these thoughts, images, feelings, and wishes are occurring in the present. When we become lost in the past, trouble comes. We stop paying attention to what is happening right here and now and focus our minds inadvertently on things and images about the past. Our emotions now in this moment may be identical to the emotions we felt in the past, making us think that we are actually living in the past or that the past is living in us. One way to recognize that you are thinking or being in the past is the experience of guilt. Guilt is always about something that has already happened. It won't be in the present. And when you are present, it will not be. The future has not come into existence either. It does not exist. We can have many thoughts about the plans we have for our future, and again, intense emotions may arise when we think about what the future may hold. We can worry, which is never an effective way to get things to happen, but we do it. It is very important to remember that our worries are about the future, and they don't occur in the present. Just as we can get lost in our thoughts and images of the past, we can get lost in the ruminating about the future. This is most people's source of anxiety. When you experience anxiety, how about asking yourself what you are worried might happen? You can be in the present and plan for the future. When we plan with awareness that we are doing that planning as a present moment activity. One-mindfulness also means doing one thing at a time with awareness. It is focused attention on only one activity, bringing the whole person to bear on that thing or activity is practicing one-mindfulness. The pain of the present moment is enough pain for anyone. Adding to painful present moments all the pain from the past and all the pain that could happen in the future is too much. It's too much suffering, and it's unnecessary suffering. Multitasking is inefficient. There's now quite a bit of research that says that, contrary to what most people believe, trying to juggle two things at once or more is not saving time. In fact, it cuts down on the ability to do things quickly and efficiently. When we're in the past or the future, life, relationships, and beauty pass us by. We do not experience many of the things we care about. We don't smell the roses. So how do we be one-mindful? First, we need to be present to our own experiences. That's the opposite of avoiding or trying to suppress our present experience. It is allowing ourselves to be aware of our current experience, our feelings, our sensations, our thoughts, our movements, and our actions. We need to rivet ourselves to now. Actively focus and maintain awareness of what we are experiencing now, what is happening now, and what we are doing now. This involves letting go of thoughts of both the past and the future. We need to do things one at a time, the opposite of how most people operate. The trick is to have our minds completely on what we are doing at this moment. This refers to both mental and physical activities. This does not mean we can't switch from one thing to another and then come back. Focusing on one thing in the moment does not mean that we cannot do complex tasks requiring many sequential activities. But it does mean that whatever we do should be attended to fully. It is the essence of undivided attention. The opposites are mindless, automatic, and distracted behaviors. Great ways to do this are in daily activities. Awareness while you are making your tea or your coffee, while you are washing your dishes, while you are meditating. Like we had the example of observing our thoughts going on a conveyor belt, picking each thought up and putting it in its appropriate box. That would be an opportunity for you to practice one-mindfulness, one thought into one basket at a time. Lastly, we have the core mindfulness how skills of effectiveness. Acting effectively is doing what works to achieve your goals. The goal here is to focus on doing what works rather than what is right or wrong, fair or unfair. Acting effectively means using skillful means to achieve your goals. Without the skill to use effective means, it is difficult to reach our goals. It's difficult to reduce suffering or to increase our happiness. Being right or proving a point may feel good in the moment, but it's not long-term effective. Having what you want is far more satisfying. So how do we act effectively? You need to know your goal or objective. Doing what works, what is effective, requires knowing what your goal is in the particular situation. You also need to know and react to the actual situation. Being effective requires knowing and reacting to what is happening right now, not what we think the situation should be. We also need to know what will work and won't work to achieve our goals. We're more likely to know what that is and what that is not as an effective means if we are calm and can think about our options. Sometimes being effective means asking for help or asking for instructions on what to do. An openness to experimenting, to staying aware of the consequences of what we do, and having sufficient humility to learn from our mistakes are essential to effectiveness. Sometimes we also need to play by the rules in order to achieve a goal. This is most important in situations where we are in a lower power position and what we want is important. Another way to be effective is to be savvy with people, oftentimes being political. Acknowledge where people are and go from there. What works in one culture may not work in another. Focusing on what's right instead of what works is like trying to impose your culture on any place that you are visiting. Being effective can also mean sacrificing a principle to achieve a goal. In extreme situations, most people are willing to sacrifice their principles, even if the rules are not fair. In real life, this is sometimes very hard. It can be especially hard when it's needed most with people of authority. So, when you want to be effective, you need to give up being right. You need to hold yourself and pause when you feel willful and demanding. Doing what is effective is in your best interest and is in the best interest of you reaching your goals. These core mindfulness how skills are essential, and they're all about practice. They go together with those wise mind skills and the what skills, which compile your core mindfulness skills. It is important to be aware and as present as possible, to slow down and to give yourself some space to learn and to stumble and to make mistakes. Being non-judgmental is so helpful in this process. If I'm not judging myself, I can learn. I can live in, I don't know, and I can get the help I need to get where I want to go. It's peaceful when we practice mindfulness skills, and it will be so powerful when we get to interpersonal effectiveness, emotional regulation, and distress tolerance.